So this session is going to be very interactive. So it's morning, so I want you guys to be a little bit awake. So I'm Stella. I'm here to talk about machine learning applications in e-learning. So, oh, this is weird. Anyway, how many of you have taken an e-learning course, whether at work or university or okay? So majority of you guys, that's good. So if I were to ask you to describe to me like a couple words what e-learning is to you, can you give me some insights or thoughts or ideas? Just please.
Democratize.
Okay, democratize. Freedom.
Self-paced.
Self-paced, yeah. Accessible. You guys are very positive about that. That's good. Anything else? Cheap. or free sometimes, some instances. Yeah, I saw some, yes.
Separation between the content provider and the audience, and scalability.
Okay, separation between content provider and the audience, and accessibility, you said? Scalability. Okay, lady at the back.
Yeah, I think e-learning is also very assumptive, right? I mean, there's a lot of assumptions we make around connectivity, access.
Assumptive. I love that word. Okay, connectivity, access, you saying just the ability to like even have access to internet and computer and technology, right? Great. Yes? On demand. Okay, good. Anyone else? Yes?
Asynchronous.
Asynchronous. What does that mean?
I'm sitting and reading, going through the courses, and the professor has long ago moved on to other things.
Okay. So the time it's not at the same time, right? It's not real time.
Lack of proper feedback.
Lack of proper feedback. Passive.
Limited relationship building with the professor and my classmates.
I love that limited relationship building with the professors and your classmates.
Stale sometimes. Same
Stale.
thing stays there for 3 years, it's old.
3 years is good. Anybody else? Yes. Starting and not finishing, yes. Motivation, attrition rate is actually, I think it's 80+% for MOOC. Okay, these are great, thank you. Yes?
Disjointed from resources.
Disjointed from resources. Okay, you guys started with a little bit more positive and then sort of tail, which is good. I do wanted to talk about it because so this is my entire world is on digital learning, right? And it's been going on for at least like 20 years. It started with distance learning, and then it moved to online platform. And one of the criticism or one of the dissatisfaction about online learning is that it's what is called one size fits all, right? It's no matter like. In these learning platform, what we call learning management systems or LMS, it's always, you had courses pushed out to you, to all the learners in a cohort or maybe individually, and they're always the same content. It's always the same material, it's the same activities. So lately, I've been seeing a lot of applications in what we call a personalized or adaptive learning. Now, this concept is nothing new. It's been also going on for about 15 or so years. I see some of you nodding, so you must have seen it over the years. But what's kind of changing for the past couple years that I've seen, it's that with machine learning algorithms, that actually finally we have the ability to do something a little bit more exciting and more interesting. I see a lot more startups that are attempting to do personalization. I see a little bit more of the innovative approach in applying AI in what we call adaptive learning. So I want to talk sort of kind of the big buckets of what adaptive learning is, and then we can move on to the more interesting discussions about the biases and the risks and how do we mitigate that as you. Do you guys develop any educational platforms or apps or anything here? Okay, so there's a few of you guys, and the rest not yet. You might eventually. It's a big industry, by the way, in e-learning, and it's growing. So it's a good is a good area to consider to go into. So the first kind of bucket of applications on adaptive learning, it's what we call a personalized learning path. Can anybody tell me what that is, what that means? Any, okay?
Maybe the platform adapts to your speed of learning, or if you have any learning difficulty, like if you are deaf, it has
Yeah.
subtitle. If you are blind, for instance, you get the material that you can touch and follow. For instance, it wouldn't be something that's just for
Right.
the majority. Just
Okay.
personalized to you.
Yeah, and so you basically talk about a couple of different ways, and it's true. In adaptation and personalization, you can adapt many things, right? One of it is your ability, like to speed up or slow down your progress of your course, or the other way is sort of your needs. Perhaps if you need to have the audio to play louder, it might detect the ambience that you're in a noisy airport, and it will play a little bit louder. But what I see more commonly in adaptive learning paths is when you take let's say a course has different modules, or if you think about it as a book, different chapters, and you normally just go through it in a sequential way. Everybody goes through it the same way. But in adaptive learning path, what you do is like learner A and learner B, depending on, let's say an attribute could be your prior knowledge about this subject matter. Depending on how the system detect that, either through some sort of assessment or as you learn on the fly, adapt that path for you. So that's one way that's really common in adaptive learning to adapt the path. Sometimes in organizations, like not academic learning, but in more workplace learning, what they adapt also, it's based on your job roles or org chart or your competencies or what it's required for your work. Also, the other thing I see is assessment, adapting, like when you're doing a test, instead of everybody taking the same test, you might get, if you answer the first question correctly, it might get a little bit more difficult for you. If you answer the first question wrong, it might maybe take you back to the content, you review the concept before you move on to the next question. So one of the companies that do adaptive learning paths is called Sumi. Have you guys heard of that? They're fairly new, but they're very, very active in promoting their adaptive learning. So you can kind of see the learning path where it just give you a visual of like how things get skipped around, depending on where you are and what attributes they're taking, and in understanding of you as a learner. So they would build what they call a student or a learner model, and it takes in the attributes of, say, learner A, had this characteristics of this knowledge base starting here, and learner B is starting a little bit higher, so the content, you might be able to skip a chapter ahead of time because you're understanding of the content. So the second kind of bucket in terms of adaptation is chatbots. Do you guys program or interact with chatbots at all? I presume most of you would at least interacted with chatbots. It's been around again for many, many years. So you guys, there's some developers here that actually built, right? Okay, so I won't go into too much details from the technical end of thing, but what I wanted to highlight is, again, recently I seen a lot more applications in the learning world. Have you heard of intelligent tutoring system in sort of a decade or so ago now? It's kind of the same concept, except now it's like your chatbot is your coach. It's your performance support buddy. It is, and it has the ability to sort of push content. It's sort of the ability to interact with you and sort of remember the previous conversation based on the level of or the questions that you ask. It would build on your knowledge. The other application I've seen in corporate learning is the ability to do knowledge management in a way that knowledge is distributed across the organization, where the chatbot can put this together and push that content to you. An example of a company, it's called Obi. I'm Canadian, so I have to pluck it out there. It's a Canadian company, and you can see by the beaver logo, it's very Canadian. So what they do is this is integrated into Slack. And then it would sort of do onboarding activities. It would do sort of coaching and performance support. Again, they said it's powered. It's an AI platform, so it would adapt and learn based on the user interaction and based on perhaps your job profile, perhaps your job role to sort of adjust the content to you. You can see they're using it for an onboarding process with a set of tasks to complete or to snooze or to park it for later. The third higher bucket of applications is called performance indicator. So this is kind of pinpointing patterns at a higher level. Let's say if you're a student going through a course at a university and you're not doing so well halfway through. So this is where they can flag it and say, hey, this student looks like it's not very motivated because it logged into the system only twice and it's been 6 weeks. Or it also look at how many times maybe you clicked on a video, how long you watched it, and that kind of pattern. And the idea is they gather a lot of what they call learner engagement data, and what they do is to identify maybe their pattern that suggested, well, maybe this content could be presented differently, maybe that could be organized differently, or maybe the whole thing need to be redesigned. So that's an example of that. Of a platform that does that. This is Desire to Learn, or called D2L. I don't know if you guys have heard of that. It's a learning management system. Some of you that gone to universities with some e-learning courses might have used this platform. They added, so this is an academic platform that crossed over to private sector as well. This is an additional module called Performance Plus. And what they do is they actually showed you I'm sorry, I'm not allowed to walk past this carpet here. A risk quadrant where, to sort of place where you're most likely at risk in terms of like your progress of the material. You can see that a little bit better. So it say predicted this person 36% at risk of performing poorly on an assessment and maybe at risk of dropping out of this course or at risk of failing. So the idea behind that is, as a tutor or as a manager at work or as somebody that is supporting the learning, you can sort of go in and say, hey, can I help you? Is there something I can support you? Are you not understanding some of the more challenging concepts, right? Okay, so we talk about kind of, that's how people are using machine learning algorithm in e-learning applications. So I just want to talk more interestingly about so this sounds all great, and it sounds like there's good applications. So what could go wrong? What are some of the biases and risk? Can you guys even guess before I review the next slide? What are your thoughts so far?
Availability of languages.
Availability of languages. Yeah, that is a great concern. Back there?
The models are basically drawing conclusions and decisions that still need human validation.
Yes.
There's contextual information missing,
And the models need improvement. Okay, so yes.
Does it account for auditory learning, visual learning, spatial?
Learning styles, learning preferences, yes.
Outdated material.
Outdated material, yeah. These are great points. So the first issue I want to talk about is prediction could be too prescriptive. I think it sort of touched on what you talk about and some of that, because there's a term you might hear called the Netflix of learning. It's based on a recommender system, right? Like you watch a few movies and Netflix is like, you might also like these movies. It's easier, and the consequences is not so great when it's recommending entertainment. For learning, it's a little bit more complex. What motivates one learner might demotivate another learner. So and you talk about learning style. It's also, it's a bit of a point of contention in the education community about, is that really such a thing as learning style? Because as it turns out, it changes over time of a person's lifetime. It also depending on the context, and it also depending on many other things, like the subject matter. If I want to learn French, even my preferred learning style is visual. I wanted to listen, right? So it varies, and it's very hard to match and prescribe that. And there's some other things like the past behavior is not the best prediction. Maybe you decided to, maybe you just go through a period of time where everything falls apart in your personal life. You weren't performing so well. It's different now, but there's no way machine learning can pick up that nuances. So I think it's the nuances I want you guys to think about, right? Also, like nuances in a classroom observation from experienced teacher, that's also something it's very difficult to replace. Now I see you guys nodding, so I can carry on with the next topic. If you guys are falling asleep, I might have to change it a little bit, right? And that's really difficult to pick up. So secondly, adaptive learning is very expensive and very time-consuming to build. And I want you guys to remember this takeaway here is because I think there's a trend now to say, oh, this is the new trend, so we must all build adaptivity into learning. But at what cost? And I think, we as developers always have to think about the cost associated with spending time and effort into something. Just because you can personalize something doesn't mean it's better learning. I would argue sometimes just focusing on the basic good instructional design principle and learning theory, it's all you need. My example is, you go watch movies and it's 3D because they just want you to think that's better. But if the story is crap, like no 3D is gonna save the day. So I want you guys to sort of remember that. Like sometimes I think we're so focusing on the icing on a cake, and the cake sucks. Like it is not gonna happen. So I think the way to keep that in mind is like focusing on the foundational. If you're designing a learning platform, is it grounded on solid pedagogical principles? If it is, sometimes that's all you need. So third, I'm sure you guys heard of algorithm black box. Why is this a bad idea? You guys talk about assumptions. You guys talk about, biases. This is where I think the problem is. I talked to Sumi, one of the platform that I showed you about adaptive learning paths. So I asked them, I said, okay, you can't tell me what is your prediction model, what attributes you're taking in. Can you tell me, the people that are developing these algorithms, what are the experiences in education background and all that stuff? They're like, oh, they're all data scientists. They're very capable of coming up with very complex and algorithm. I said, do they understand about learning? Are they educational people? They're like, not really. So here's my point to you guys. When you're developing different platform, are you able to talk to colleagues from different background and different fields to get that perspective? Because we all are humans, we all have our biases, we study in a certain academic disciplines, and we bring that view with us. And I'm not talking about diversity just even subject matter, but also diversity in life experience. We talk about languages, even just languages shaped our view of the world. So you need to think about what is that limitation, or what are some of the assumptions that comes with that. Diversity also means age. Certain people, maybe think about, processing information differently. Maybe maybe even just the font size matter, depending on how well you read the screen. So I think right now I still see that a lot of these AI for e-learning companies are just focusing on the technological aspect of that. They don't think about having people from different discipline to look into the same solution. I don't know if this is something that you guys are also experiencing. I encourage you to start thinking about that, opening up that conversation to other people, get other people to look at your work. So, of course, we all talk about the issue of trust. I think especially in the private sector and in academic world too, I think we collect a lot of data when people are accessing these learning platforms and systems. But oftentimes, they don't tell you where to get the data or how to get the data and what they're going to use with that. The challenge is sometimes, especially in workplace learning, they are linked to performance, right? Like your performance review, it's depending on you completed certain safeties modules, you completed certain onboarding process. What if they flag you and say you're at risk? Like, how is that going to link? Like, you might be worried because they don't tell you. Like, is this connected? And if it's connected, what are the implications on that? So I think that it's creating a bit of the culture of mistrust. Even at university level, I think students are concerned about how they use learning analytics. So this is something I also wanted you guys to think a little bit more in terms of how do you open up that collection of data. So I think, have you guys heard of the notion of explainable AI? Okay, good. So you should. I know this also is a bit of a point of contention because, especially if you're developing things, it's a pain to think about slowing that down, to open that up and say, well, I don't know because if I'm showing every variable that I consider, like how am I going to open that up and how I'm going to develop that? I think sometimes it's about the granularity of how much you can show and how much you can't, right? So it's definitely a conversation it's worth having. And I think also the key thing is, showing the willingness to work with the users, showing the willingness to have that conversation to get feedback. And I think it's not like you have to, it's not like, it's not like you're Uber and you have to give the source code from the backend to the public. I mean, that is not viable. And I think a lot of companies are really worried that is what explainable AI is supposed to be. But it's really about start building that openness, start having some space to have dialogue between your end users and the backend. So finally, I just want to say, we all have a responsibility, either as a developer, as a designer, as educator, or even just as business owners, to sort of engage in this decision-making process when you're developing these learning applications or other applications, and to safeguard the practice, to set some guidelines around it. I think it's an exciting time. Like now, nothing is really set. Even we have some AI principles. It's up for debate. There's still room to put more context into it. There's still time to sort of rally your troops and talk to other people. So I challenge each of you to think a little bit more deeply about that, and I challenge each of you to drive that change. And with that, I think feel free to connect with me, and thank you for being so engaging. I have 1 minute left, so we can open up for questions. You guys have been great, by the way. Yes, I think, hang on, no, okay, so go on.
What are the successful approaches you incorporated to improve your accountability and transparency? Because for different companies, it might be, take different ways, but in your own experience, how did you manage to accomplish your transparency and accountability towards your customers?
Yeah, so I think, so she was saying what process and what methodology do I use to have that accountability to your end users and your customers in making it transparent. So that's a great question. I think what I always do is start with sort of the user-centered design methodology to engage the actual end users early from, even from the needs assessment stage when you're designing, prototyping your product, to get some feedback from them to say, is this a concern? Is this something, this is the kind of data that we're collecting. These are the model that we're building. These are the attributes we're collecting. These are the assumptions we're making. I think to start, if you can, as early, like I always believe in, and involving your end users from day one, to build that into your development cycle, to get feedback at every stage, and to always, test 3 users. That's a basic usability principle. Just find 3 people to test that and get that feedback early on. I know companies are very resistant in accessing end users, so I fight that battle all the time. So be insistent, because I think at the end, not just about building trust and be accountable, you also end up with a better product. Questions?
So he was first. So.
Oh, sorry.
Are there any efforts to distribute learning over the learner's lifetime, like specifically in context of the spacing effect?
As in, like, have I seen any trends in that, or?
Like, is anyone doing that, particularly in context of like adaptive learning?
Across a span of a lifetime.
Right. Like, so there was all that research that said, like, if you increase the intervals between testing, like with like an exponential distribution, then you get like better recall. So is anyone doing something like that, like over the context of over the time span of years or even a lifetime?
I haven't seen anything in that magnitude of years. I think what I've seen more and more are organizations that are making effort in sort of more lifelong learning, right? That goes beyond a particular organization. So I think there's more of a shift to, just once you finish university, you enter the workforce, you work in this company for 3 years, and your learning stays there. And then you move on to another job, and then you have to start some other learning. So I see a bit of a shift toward, can we have a more connected effort outside organization in a higher level? I've seen some of the open learning initiatives to sort of work with organizations to sort of make that more continuous, but not in anything adaptive. This is still, like, in terms of adaptive learning, using machine learning algorithm, it's so new. I think they're just focusing on more of a sort of more targeted approach, and I don't see a lot of continuous effort that goes across time. And if you guys know any of the other references, I am happy to know about that.
I think the
Yeah.
Khan Academy with the pilot schools are doing that with the following kids through the years.
Oh yeah, for K through 12, I think there's a bit more effort but I guess for adult learning, I don't see that much. That you're correct. K through 12, there's a bit more of that continuation throughout the developmental years.
How do you deal with the sort of inherent bias that if you're adapting the system based on sort of a set of metrics that you're measuring throughout, it kind of biases the system to things that can be measured with these computerized metrics, and it sort of may drive the style of the education, or like the final destination of the education, towards things that can be measured and adapted to. And do you think that kind of biases these sorts of adaptive courses towards sort of 101 levels, where the goal is the distribution of information, versus the higher levels where the goal would be sort of more creative or broad?
Okay, so let me understand your question. So is the goal of education more distribution of information, or the goal to have a more creative individual?
Well, I think this also might stem off, say, some of the questions about, say, MCAS testing, that, the concern that you you end up structuring the education based on the assessments.
Yeah.
And sort of as you bring this into an adaptive learning system, that you may
I
structure
get you what you're
Okay.
saying. Yeah, this is this is an ongoing debate. How much time do I have here? Because I think this is if any of you ever even worked in the education field, I think you understand the debate about is assessment only like you standardized testing, right? You're talking about because that's how we always validate how well you learn certain content, and that ideology get transported into these adaptive system, correct? Yeah, so that is certainly a concern, but I think one of the promise of e-learning is that we can cater to more diversity of assessment. There's digital portfolio platform that are available for sort of the kind of thing that it's a little bit more creative than just standardized testing. I have not seen like an adaptive e-portfolio, by the way, yet. But I think those are opportunities to move away from just multiple choice questions. Although you're correct in looking at assessment, it's also encouraging because it's easier to grade them. It's easier to build adaptivity in it. But there's a company that also provide adaptive assessment for essays. So I see a trend also in looking into more of the qualitative assessment or looking at the more difficult assessment and build some machine learning algorithm in that. By no means that's perfect. The essay grading mechanism, it really just helps you sort of sort out piles of these are potentially A papers, these are potentially B, but they strongly advise to have a human tutor to review each one, right? So I think they can do the more broad stroke adaptation, but not so much the nuances. So I think it's getting there. I think there's some movement away from just adapting standardized questions, but that takes. I mean, that's very challenging, right?
How about we see an art school based on Deep Dream?
Oh, that would be interesting. Yeah, thank you for that.
So I sort of have a follow-up question for the gentleman who asked earlier about interspersing adaptive learning over a longer period of time. Mm-hmm. Specifically, there are a number of examples, sort of anecdotal rather, from my life that my cousin, for example, has an engineering job, and this is his second job. The first job was more in line with what he had done later on in his academic learning. How this new job is more fundamentally rooted in some of the earlier principles that he learned more earlier in his academic learning and things that he's no longer as familiar with as a result. So do you see adaptive learning being used potentially in higher academic learning institutions to sort of do retesting for previously completed courses and content that may be separate from the new stuff in order to ensure that there is enough cross-comprehension that is retained over to the completion of your degree?
That's a very interesting concept. I think that would be something they should offer for alumni, right? I don't see a lot of that. Open University in the UK, it's doing a little bit of that because the mandate is about lifelong learning, about open access. So I see more of these open universities. There are many open universities around the world. I think they are more mature in pushing that out. Until these academic institutions partner with industry, I think it's very, I see that currently they're still very siloed. They don't do a lot of crossovers, especially in North America. I think we're very behind in doing that. I've seen Europe has some effort in working with industries, but I think here it's still, I think it's a great idea. Somebody should push it out there. But I personally have not seen that as a mandate or as a focused effort in developing that. Yes.
So core element of assessment for comprehension is the idea of re-explainability, that someone who intrinsically understands a concept can re-explain it using either different words or providing different examples that may have been included in the reference material, ideally at a later period of time where they cannot recall things either paraphrase or verbatim. Do you see machine learning as a way of trying to enable that sort of assessment in a remote scenario versus now, which is really that can only be done in person-to-person interaction and sort of workplace-type assessments?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly. I think that would be one of the better application is to able to. It's very time-consuming. I think that's the challenge. So it will have to be very selective in like what are some difficult concepts. You can explain it in different ways, right? You can do it on every single learning concept because. Imagine maintaining one course, and imagine maintaining one course with like 8 possibility or different outcomes. That is we already don't have money in developing learning. Training budget is the first thing to cut, as you know, in organizations. And so think about that as an implication. But I think having said that, actually my own PhD research was on that about how do you package learning differently to push it out. So if you're learning like programming, how can you cater to visual learners to get the concept visually? How can you cater to people that want to just practice over and over and over again? How do you cater to people that are more social learner that wanted to discuss these sets of codes to your peers? So there's opportunity to do that, and that's been done in some of the adaptive learning is sort of take some sort of learning preferences and more like a suggestions rather than prescription to say, perhaps you also you watch this one video on this concept, here's 4 videos and here's a transcript on that to show you. Research has shown that it's better to give learner a choice of what they wanted to learn, and it's not make the assumptions that if you watch video, you always want to watch videos. Push them to other alternatives as well, right? Not just feed it to you and cater to you. Learning is also about challenging you. Learning is also about pushing you out of your comfort zone slightly. So I think that's where the challenge is. Like, when do you say, okay, I'm going to cater to what you always like, and when I'm going to push you a little bit. Like, think about a good coach. They don't always say good job. They would be like, can you run an extra mile? Good job, right? So think about the balance and the tension between the two.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. You guys have been wonderful.